I do want to be somewhat careful with how I'm going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings here because while I don't think it's true that they have just suddenly gotten worse on defense, I think there's just a increase in talent that this defense has gone against in the past 2 weeks compared to the beginning of the season. I think these last 2 weeks where they go against offenses including weapons like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, and the rest of the guys that are on Detroit, and this week when they go against Kyren Williams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, you compare that to week one when they were going against basically just Malik Neighbors with the Giants. They faced a really good San Francisco offense, but as we all know, San Francisco has been without Christian McCaffrey the entire season. When they destroyed Houston at home, Houston didn't have a running back. And when they beat Green Bay, that was Jordan Love's first game off of a sprained MCL. And even in that game, Jordan Love looked pretty, turnover prone. These last 2 weeks, I think teams are starting to kind of, see through this defense in a way. Because scoring has been much easier on this defense than it has been in the first 5 weeks of the year. You have 2 back-to-back games where Minnesota gives up 30-plus points, and to 2 quarterbacks who aren't really, they're not the typical new age quarterback that have athleticism at their disposal. They aren't 2 quarterbacks who you look at and are just, especially at this point in Matthew Stafford's career, we don't look at either Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford as complete game changers at quarterback. They're 2 very good quarterbacks in the NFL. They are not on the level of a Patrick Mahomes or one of these quarterbacks that you completely have to change your game plan around. But they're 2 very savvy, very good veteran quarterbacks who have seen a lot of defenses, and they've seen this defense from Brian Flores for years now. And you saw in the first 5 weeks of the year when they were going against quarterbacks like Daniel Jones, when they were going against quarterbacks like Brock Purdy, like CJ Stroud, like Jordan Love, those were quarterbacks that are pretty fresh in the league. Even though Daniel Jones is in his 6th year, he hasn't played as much football in terms of games as you would expect for a 6-year, 5th-year player. So now that they're seeing quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford, like Jared Goff, who have been in this league for a very long time and have weapons at their disposal and have seen defenses that bring pressure, that show simulated pressure, that, show one thing and do another. They've seen it all. And especially someone like Matthew Stafford, who's won a Super Bowl, this is a tough sign if I'm a Vikings fan because defensively we don't look good. Now, you have 3 straight games against AFC South opponents coming up. You hope, if you're the Minnesota Vikings, that you are, I would think, 7-4 or 7-3, excuse me. You would hope you're 7-3 coming out of this stretch, because if you're 6-4, or forbid, you are 5-5 after 3 games against the Colts, Jaguars, and Titans, the season might be over. The season might be a wash. This is starting to be a little bit scary for the Minnesota Vikings, especially after 5 straight wins to start the year. You look at it now and you think, man, they either aren't going at the same rate that they were those first 5 weeks, or something else is happening. Maybe it's injuries, and we did see Christian Darrisaw go down at the end of the first half. And that's an injury that's, it's going to mean a lot for Minnesota's offense. You saw the very last play of the game basically was a sack on Sam Darnold, and it came from the side where Christian Darrisaw was not. So like I said, I don't want to sit here now after they've played 2 very good teams that they kept up with until the end. But if this defense starts to slip a little bit, I don't know if the offense can keep up, especially without their franchise left tackle. We put a lot of stock into Sam Darnold after those first 5 weeks. We put a lot of thought into wondering if he is, if he's taken the next step, if he's the guy in Minnesota. But it might be time to reconsider if Minnesota is really about it, because they've shown the last 2 weeks. Yes, they put up 20 points today. And yes, while I do admit that they were competitive in this game, it was very easy for LA to go up and down on Minnesota in this game. There were very few drives that ended in an LA Rams punt. There were very few drives that didn't end in points for the LA Rams. And there were very few moments where you saw Minnesota do something offensively where LA didn't respond. Every single drive that Minnesota scored on, LA came down and either matched them in terms of points, or they came down and scored even more. Every time Minnesota, scored a touchdown, LA came back and scored a touchdown. Every time Minnesota scored a field goal, LA came back, scored a touchdown. So, again, this could just be, you're playing the Rams for the first time basically all season, having all of their weapons available. And Minnesota was a team coming into this game defensively down a few of their key pieces. They still defensively, I think, even if they had Blake Cashman, even if they had their full defense available, they didn't look good. And I don't know if those guys being there would have fixed that issue. And I don't know going forward if they're going to be able to. I just don't know. Minnesota sees some good teams to end the year, and they see some pretty explosive offenses 5 of their last 6 games of the year. I would be careful making sure that these next few weeks you beat the teams you need to beat. Because if you don't start winning your games now, if you don't keep on winning your games now, it might be too late for Minnesota.